Hi everyone, welcome back to Little by Little. I'm always happy to have you here. This is part 2 of our exterior walls. In our last video, we did the permanent walls, and today we're going to work on the removable walls. So these walls, once they're constructed, you'll be able to pop off and pop back on. And that way you have access to see inside of the house once it's completed. I'm getting pretty excited because the project is actually starting to look like a house. So I feel like all the hard work that we've been doing is finally showing some results, which is so cool. I did want to, before we get started, I wanted to send a shout out and a huge thank you to Ara from Bentley House Minis. I have once again stolen one of her techniques, and I'll be using the magnet system that she's using in her Beetlejuice house. So I always want to give credit where credit is due. So without further ado, let's get started. So for this tutorial, we're going to be working in this section. So this is the back wall of the living room, dining room area. So I've measured out this area. It's 11 5/8 of an inch wide and 8 7/8 of an inch high. And what we're going to be doing is basically building two very small sections on either side up against the wood dowel. And then there'll be a centerpiece, which will be the piece that actually pops off and back on. We are going to be using magnets for the project, and so these two little side sections will have some metal pieces in them that of course the magnet will stick to. The magnets themselves will be on the center section. So we're going to start building the two sides first. All of the pieces that we're cutting for this part of the project is just out of one single piece of the foam board. So I've already measured this out to be 8 7/8 inches high. And so I'm just going to be cutting my pieces from this. So I need two pieces of 1 1/4 inch by 8 7/8 inches high. So 1 1/4, and then I'm going to go to 2 1/2 because I need to cut out two pieces. Measure it as well at the top. 1 1/4 and 2 1/2, and we'll cut those out. I also need two pieces that are 3/4 of an inch wide. Now for each side of those walls, we need, of course, one of each of the different sizes of strips. And what we're going to do is we're going to glue the smaller one on top of the larger one on the outside edge. So I'm going to go ahead and glue that down. And I need to make sure it's nice and flush on the side as well as the bottom. Now, normally when you're gluing, I like to weight things down. It's hard to do that when it's only this size. So instead of using books like I would normally do, I'm going to just put some clamps on there. And the reason that I'm putting the popsicle sticks on first is I don't want there to be an indentation from the clamp on the foam board. So just give those about 10-15 minutes to dry. Before I move on to putting in the metal piece, I just want to do a quick dry fit just to make sure that it is in there great. Lovely. Sometimes you'll find that your walls aren't 100% square and you need a good tight fit for the glue, right? So if you had too big of a gap, you may need to do a little bit of trimming, but in this case, I think it looks pretty good. I'm not going to glue it in just yet though, because as I said, I do want to put in the metal piece, and I also want to build the inside piece as well so that I'm sure that the magnets and the metal pieces line up. I've also gone ahead and I've cut another 2 pieces of single ply, and the first one will be the distance between the back sheets, and then a second sheet which will fit in the front pieces. I just want to show you what that looks like. So as I said, the one in the back is just a little bit smaller than the one in the front, and it's going to fit in like so. And then the second piece in the front. I'm going to pull this out and just show you from the top what that looks like. As you can see, the middle piece is at different levels, just like the back pieces are, and they just kind of fit together almost like a puzzle, like so. We need to also construct a small handle so that when the house is complete and the roof is on, we have something that we can remove the wall with. So I'm going to be using a piece of 16 gauge floral wire, and I'm going to make a small handle out of a piece of this wire. Now, if you don't have this kind of wire, something that I've also used in past that works well is just a jumbo size paper clip. You can straighten it and bend it. The only thing is with the paper clip is it's not as strong, and sometimes if you overbend or bend and then have to bend back, sometimes they'll break. So just a word of caution. I did pick up this wire at a Michael's craft store, and it works really well. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut off a piece that's about 6 inches long. So just using my grid on my cutting mat to cut off a piece here. Would recommend hanging on to both pieces because one tends to fly if you don't hang on to it. There we go. And now we have to bend this. So I'm just going to use a piece of white foam board just so that you can see easier what that bend will look like. So the first bend that we're going to use is about at the 2-inch mark. So we're just going to make a U shape using, just use my ruler here as a guide. So I need to make a bend here, and I'm just going to use a pair of needle nose pliers to do that. And you're just making a 90-degree angle. And then we'll do another one at the 2-inch mark on the other side. If it's not exact, that's okay. It's just going to be an approximate. So now you can see that we have a U-shaped bend. Each side is 2 inches, so 2 inches on each side and then 2 inches in the middle. Now this top piece, I'm going to bend forward 90 degrees. And I'm going to do that at about the 1/2 inch mark. And on the other side. So hopefully you can see that. So we're still in a U shape, but the top piece is bent forward. And it's this piece that's going to come out from in between the two pieces of foam board that's going to be the handle that we'll be able to grab to move the wall off. Now I'm going to do one more thing to each of the sides, and that is I'm going to do a small bend at about the 1/2 inch from the end, and I'm just going to bend it out about 45 degrees just out to the side. The reason that I've bent those out is that this is going to be, this piece, these two end pieces are going to be glued between the two pieces of foam board. And if you have this bottom piece kind of going off to an angle, it's not going to pull out of the board as easily as if these were straight. Glue, I think, only goes so far. And if you put a little bit of pressure on it, if these were straight, there's a good chance that it might actually pull out on you. But by bending these out slightly, chances are it's not going to pull out quite as easily. So now I'm just going to go ahead and mark on the top of the foam board. This would be the back piece. And so I'm going to mark kind of approximately where that handle is going to sit. And I'm going to put some pencil lines there. And probably so that when I lay that back on, I know approximately where it's going to sit, because I am going to now take my X-Acto knife and just run a very shallow cut through the paper where that wire is going to be. And then I'm also going to take an embossing tool. So an embossing tool just has a rounded edge on it. And I'm just going to go over that line and just kind of press it in a little bit. And I'm basically just creating a groove for that piece of wire to sit in. That way, when I glue it in, it's going to sit into the board a little bit, and it's not going to cause the board to be wider than it would normally be. So I'm going to install that first, and then I'm going to attach the top piece on top of it so that this will be glued into the center. Just give you an example, just use this piece. So if this was the whole top piece, it would then sit like that, and your little handle will sit in between the two. Okay, so you can see where I've now glued in that handle. I've also glued together these two pieces of foam board, and as you can see, I've cut out the hole for the window that's going to be on this wall. So when these go back in for the wall, they will sit like that. So we have a few different options for the metal side. Really, as long as it's flat and a magnet will stick to it, it'll work. But here's just a couple of suggestions that you can use. So these are just standard staples. And I've got, there's probably 6 or 7 staples that are still stuck together there. And then if you take a pair of wire cutters or a pair of tweezers or pliers, and you can just kind of work the ends off by bending them back and forth, like so. And you can do that to both sides. And then you have a nice flat piece of metal that a magnet will stick to. Now, you can also use, and this is what I'm going to be using today, a strip of nails from a nail gun. If you happen to have a handy husband who has this kind of stuff in the garage, or you can just pick up a box at, you know, any hardware store. And I usually snip off or bend off about 4. And really they break apart so easy. And you can use that as well. So that's what we're going to use. I'm just going to take, let's see, I have 4 pieces of nail there. I'm going to do 4 of those because I'm going to have a piece here, 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 and here. I prefer the nails because they're a little easier to work with, but I do know that not everybody has access to those. And so if you don't, then the staples work fine too. I think I might have got 5 in that one. That's okay. When it comes to your magnets, I picked up these off of Amazon. They're very tiny, so hopefully you can see it. It's about 5 millimeters by 1 millimeter, and you buy them in packets of, there's about 300 or 400 in a box, so they'll certainly last you a good long time. And for this project, I thought about just using 4, one for each of the pieces of metal, but I found when I tested it that it just wasn't quite strong enough, so I'm going to use 8 of these little magnets in total. But let's do the metal first. I'm going to put these metal pieces into these smaller pieces that we cut. And as you can see, so the bigger piece is the piece that sits at the back, and that's the piece that we're going to put the metal onto. So I'm just going to lay them kind of in the middle this way, and then one at the top, one at the bottom, and I'm just going to trace around it with a pencil. And then just using my X-Acto knife, I'm just going to cut through just the paper itself, because I really want these pieces of metal to sit down flush inside of this piece of foam board. So I don't want to cut all the way through the foam board. I just want to cut through the paper itself. Just very gently. And then if I stick my knife in there, I can actually just pull up that piece of paper. So now I just have the foam underneath. Now this piece of metal will now, if you just gently push it, will push in so that it's flush with the top of the piece. Like so. So we'll do the same to the other side. Again, being very careful not to go too deep. And we'll just push it down. Once you've got the top layer of paper off of there, the foam actually will push down quite easily for you. So once you've pushed it down so that it's flush. Then you can take them back out and just put a little bit of glue in there, and then we'll put them back in. So now we're going to put the magnets onto the larger piece. And so those magnets are going to go in this grooved area on either side, right in here. So I'm just going to lay these not quite flush together, but close, because I do want to measure with my pencil. I'm going to put a mark at the top and bottom of each of those pieces of metal so that I know exactly where to position the magnets. There we go. So I'm going to put these aside for now. And I'll just carry that line to the back. And I know that I laid these pretty much center width-wise, and so I'll do the same for the magnets on this side. Okay, I've just laid this on top of a book because, as you can see, that hook faces downwards now, and I want a flat surface. So I'll just put it on the book. And I have 8 little magnets that we talked about earlier. And so we're going to put 2 magnets in each spot. So first thing I need to do is to just basically trace out where those magnets are going to go. And so keeping in mind that I have to stay between the 2 lines I've drawn there. I'll put one here and one here. So you can see that. So this is where the metal piece is, and then the 2 magnets will be between those 2 lines. I'm going to kind of trace around just so I know how big the magnet is going to be. And then just like I did for the metal piece, I'm going to cut out the paper on the foam board. Again, just going through the paper, not cutting too deep into the foam itself. I just want to test and make sure that it's going to fit. Oh, don't there. Okay, we're just going to push that down into the foam a little bit. They like to stick together. There we go. And then we'll just apply some glue and have them stick in. The trick is to get them to stick into the hole so that they're not attracting to each other. Go. Just going to hold those in there with my finger until they've had a little bit of a chance to set. Okay, and then we'll do the same for the other 3 sides. Okay, so we have all of our magnets now in place, and before we put them together, we're going to put a little piece of paper over top of each, and that's because gluing these magnets into the foam doesn't have a lot of structure to it. And so if you don't put any kind of cover on them, what will happen is you'll snap them together, and then when you try and take them apart, either one of your magnets will pull loose from the foam board, or perhaps maybe your metal piece will pull through, and because they like to stay together once they're together. So we're going to put just a little piece of paper over top of each one. It's not a lot, but it's enough to keep them in place. So I'm just going to go ahead and use some Podge Get a little paintbrush. And I'm going to try not to put it directly on the magnets or the metal itself, just on the sides. Take a little piece of paper and just lay that over top. So when that dries, that paper will help to keep those magnets in place. And the paper isn't thick enough that it's going to interfere with the strength of the magnet either. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on all 4 of the pieces with the magnets, but I'm also going to do it on the pieces with the metal nails as well. So these have all had a chance to dry now, and so now I want to show you just how they go together. So this being the top, this now snaps onto there, and this side snaps onto there. So you can kind of see that it is like a nice strong bond to keep it in place, but not so strong that you can't pull it apart. So when these 2 pieces on the end are glued into the sides, then this will then just snap in place. I'm going to go ahead now and install these 2 pieces into the sides of the house. So we're going to start with one of the end pieces. Just going to put some, I'm going to use wood glue this time because we are gluing up against a wood dowel. So I'm only going to glue on the side and on the bottom. Now you can put a couple pieces of painter's tape there if you like, just to hold it secure. I'll just hold that in place, and then we'll do the other side. And then we'll just let that dry. Now that those are dry, if we take our middle piece, you'll see that it just snaps right in there, just like it was meant to be. So that's basically how the removable walls work. I am going to side this piece as well, just like I did with the permanent walls. But when I do my template, rather than just covering just this piece, I'm actually going to do my template so that it goes from the outside edge to the outside edge. I do want to cover these smaller pieces and make it look like it's just one big wall. So once that's done, I'm going to come back and show you a final picture so that you can see what the finished project looks like. And then we'll probably end the video there. So I just wanted to show you a couple of things that I did after the fact. I did two things. So the first thing is that I just went ahead and I painted this foam board that was on either side. You don't see it when the wall is on, obviously, but I just thought that it needed something a little bit more finished than just the white, because there will be lots of times when the wall is off, and I didn't want it to look unfinished underneath there. So I did do that. I also added a small piece to the side of this wall. I just took a piece of the same strip that I used for the wall, and I bent it in half lengthwise. And I just made a little bit of a casing, I guess you could say, on the side. And that's because if you can see here, that this edge is still very unfinished on the other side. And when I put the two edges together, it just looked unfinished. And so just by adding this one little strip of cardboard here, when I snap it in place, you actually don't then see that unfinished look. It actually looks fairly finished, as you can see. So now that that's done, I'm going to move on and I'm going to finish the last two pieces of removable wall, which will be in the kitchen and in the porch area. And then we'll get started. I think when that's done, I think I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm probably going to do something inside the house. I'm getting just a little bit of building fatigue by doing all of this stuff. And so before I tackle the windows and the doors, I want to do something a little more fun. So I haven't decided yet exactly what that's going to be, but I will certainly be sharing it with you. So I hope you've enjoyed the process so far. If you're enjoying the videos, please subscribe. And if you like the video, give me a like or a comment. All of those things help me, or help my channel, get into the correct algorithm so that it starts getting out there to more people. That's the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.